Get Bringer here. Subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor DungeonMaster, and this is the home of independent role-playing games. Today we're taking a look at Mazes by Chris O'Neill, published by Ninth Level Games. Full disclosure, I was not paid for this review, and I was not given a review copy. I bought my own copy because I believe in supporting small game companies. I did get a demo of the game at last year's Origins by the Ninth Level Games staff, and I loved the game back then, and I never had the time to review it, what with all the news that went on this year. And I said to myself, I've got to review this game before next Origins, so at that Origins at least, Ninth Level Games can sell out. So this is my review of Mazes. Let's take a look. Today we're looking at Mazes by Chris O'Neill, published by Ninth Level Games. This is hardbound, nearly 300 pages. It's not slick pages, but they are very sturdy. It has not one, but two bookmarks. And we've got the glue and stitch binding, it looks like. Very, very sturdy. You're not going to get this attention to detail in a mass market publication. This is made with love. Now, typically, I like it when games use the end pages, although this art is terrific. However, this is such a rules-like game, I don't think you're going to need it when I show you the character sheets. This is a great heading. Is this Dungeons & Dragons? No. What it is a dark fantasy role-playing game, or low fantasy role-playing game, I should say, in the style of the Farvard and the Grey Mouser stories. Swords Against Death and Darkness, that's a nod to Fritz Leiber's great stories. So here's the thing that makes this game different, and I'm going to show you the character sheet when we do it. This is my wife's character sheet, and this is my character sheet. This is from a demo the Ninth Level Games staff were kind enough to do for us last year. So your character will only use one type of die, and it is dictated by your role in the game. The four roles are Paragon, Vanguard, Fighter, and Sentinel. Paragon is a thinker, the Vanguard is a jack of all trades, the Fighter is a fighter. The Sentinel role is a character who protects someone, like Lone Wolf and Cub. That is not the same thing as class, because we have role, aspect, and class, and they define your character. The role is what type of character you would be in a story. Aspect is how you choose to solve problems, and class is kind of what you do for a living. So Paragons use the D4, the Vanguard uses the D6, the Fighter uses the D8, and the Sentinel uses the D10. And you only ever roll this die. So this is the way tasks are resolved. When you're rolling books, which is over here, you're testing knowledge, perception, and mental powers. Also listening, seeing, and remembering. When you test books, you have to roll a 2 or a 3. So if you are a Paragon, it will be much easier to do that. Boots is a test of running, jumping, dodging, sneaking, anything to do with dexterity or agility. And for boots, you have to roll a 3, 4, or a 5. Blades are when you need to take violent actions like combat. You need to roll a 4, 5, 6, or 7. And bones is essentially when you need to make saving throws to resist poison or disease. You may have noticed the Paragon can't roll bones naturally. They need a special resolution instead. And we get to the mechanics called the key and the crown. So the key is when you roll a natural 1, and it unlocks certain special abilities, depending on who you are. The crown is the highest number on your die, and when you roll a crown, you may get a bonus action. It depends on the current darkness of the game. The darkness is sort of the difficulty number for that encounter. You don't have hit points, you have hearts, similar to other games like Index Card RPG or Easy D6. But when you run out of hearts, you essentially end up with a debilitating condition. There are also stars, which you can use to take special actions, and flashback mechanics, very similar to Blades in the Dark. The darkness is a barometer of danger, and it's a way for the game master to control the story. As the darkness rises, things get harder. So earlier in the adventure, the darkness is said to be bright, which means they are introductory level challenges. Then the game becomes torchlit, and it's possible things could become bleak, like if you're facing a major villain. Earlier in the game, if you get reduced to death's door, that is, you're at 0 hearts, you have advantage on your death save. When it's bleak, you have disadvantage to your death save. So It's a mechanic that makes sure you're probably going to last till the end of the adventure before you bite the dust. Very similar to a story, right? We don't want our heroes dying early on. Advances come in the form of edges. You can take additional edges. There are different conditions. Your character might be stressed, tired, hurt, or marked, and this will give disadvantages to different checks. If you run out of hearts and you get put on death's door, you roll a d4 on a 1, you're going to die. Otherwise, you could end up marked, or you could be lucky and just pop up again. So aspects are how you approach things. So if you solve your problems with your sword, you have the sword aspect. If you solve problems with stealth, you have the shadow aspect. If you solve problems with sorcery, you have the sorcery aspect. Then you have classes, which gives you access to additional powers. And about 20 classes or so. And these are classes that come out of traditional sword and sorcery stories. The adventurous small folk, the tomb robber, the dangerous bravo, the filthy urchin, the locksmith, the alchemist, and the savage barbarian and talented thief. This would be what Favard and Grey Mouser are. And you get some choices as to what type of thief you are. Are you accurate or are you quiet? Are you agile and difficult to catch? Are you charming and personable? Or are you keen? Do you solve problems with your mind and cunning? Each class comes with suggested names and a kit that contains your starting equipment. Magic is created by combining a domain with a school. And when you cast a spell, you spend a star. And these domains resemble schools of magic, like the sky, the sea, the earth, evocation, summoning. We also have a curious grimoire that covers some magic items, although there's not as many magic items as you'd find in Dungeons & Dragons because there's not as many magic items in sword and sorcery fiction. And we have an excellent Game Master section. Here, the Game Master is called the Maze Controller. It gives a little history of how Dungeon Mastery evolved. And it goes over the rules philosophy, which is rulings, not rules. Although these mechanics are very unique and modern, Mazes still tries to keep to that old school tradition where the Game Master has the final say. And it's very clear in what it's trying to replicate, which is tales of swords and sorcery. And if you don't know what that means, it's not the epic world-saving fantasy of Lord of the Rings or 5e. It's the gritty, down-to-earth anti-hero types like Conan. And they talk about the novella style of play. Mazes does not assume that we're going to play a continuous campaign with the same characters and watch these characters rise in power from first level. You might have one-off games, or you might return to characters at different points in their development. Just like the first Conan story, The Phoenix on the Sword, sees Conan as an old man, but later stories describe his exploits as a young man. They say a novella does not spend the time world building. The characters are generally reactive and responsive. Show us the world, don't tell us about it. Get to the heart of the story and avoid sidetracks and subplots. A session should take 2 to 3 hours, the sweet spot for tabletop play. If you have all day on a Saturday, plan 2 sessions. Yes, I strongly believe in that style of play. Advice on keeping it Weird Tales, which was an old pulp magazine, and keep the mazes, the adventures dark and deadly. And advice on how to tell a story, how to engage in a dialogue with your players, and what book would be complete without a bestiary. There are several unique monsters here like the crab folk, the ember maw, the gaunt wolves, and classics like the owl bear. And the stat block looks like a challenge rating and a number of hearts. And if you're coming from Dungeons & Dragons, you can see the immediate advantage that it is so much easier to read and easier to run. You'll notice the monster stat blocks are super simple with only 2 numbers. The first is the number of edges the monster has, like if it's armored and it can fly, that would be 2 edges. And how many hearts it has, how many times it can be hit before it goes down. All the threats in mazes are player-facing. That means you never roll for the monsters to attack the players. Instead, you state the monster attacks and that player chooses to defend or avoid the attack, and they roll all the dice. The result is a very simple stat block, and with less rules, the Game Master can concentrate on narrating the results of the rolls instead of having to make rolls themselves. Mazes is very well written and has a strong pulp fantasy vibe, similar to Black Sword Hack, which I also recently reviewed, but whereas that game uses the D&D engine, Mazes uses more modern mechanics, Those mechanics are clearly influenced by Powered by the Apocalypse, Dungeon World, Blades in the Dark, and Savage Worlds, but it puts its own unique spin on them. Those are all great games, so it really depends on what you're looking for, but my wife and I were impressed with the depth and playability of the game. We sat down, created original characters, and went through a 7-room dungeon in about an hour and 15 minutes. Maze is a big 2 thumbs up from me. It's available from 9th Level Games at the link below, and I am looking forward to playing more of it. Also below, you can find links to my own games, Deathbringer and Eldritch Hack, as well as Dungeon Craft Patreon, where you can support my work. Until the next time, may all your rolls be 20s.